I remember a moment in my life, not when everything was going right, but when everything was still undecided. There was a morning where I woke up and realized something uncomfortable. Nothing outside of me was holding me back anymore. No excuses, no distractions, no one to blame. Just me, and the choices I kept repeating. And I'll tell you the truth, that's a dangerous moment for a man. Because when the noise disappears, you finally hear yourself clearly. And I didn't like everything I heard. I saw how many mornings I had wasted thinking I had time. How many opportunities I had postponed under the disguise of tomorrow. How many times I had chosen comfort and called it rest. But let me tell you something powerful I learned in that silence. Your life doesn't change when you get inspired. It changes when you stop negotiating with your habits. I remember a season in life where mornings didn't feel like opportunity. They felt like resistance. You open your eyes, and before your feet even touch the floor, the weight of everything you're supposed to become is already sitting on your chest. And I had to sit with a hard truth. Nobody was coming to wake me up from the life I was slowly falling asleep in. So I made a decision. Not a loud one, not emotional, a quiet one. I decided that the first battle of my day would not be with the world, but with myself. Because if I could not master the moment I opened my eyes, then I had no business expecting to master anything beyond it. That's where it started for me. Not with success, not with applause, but with discipline in the dark. Waking up before comfort could negotiate with me. Before excuses could form sentences. Before doubt could find a voice. And I learned something powerful in those early hours. When you wake up early with intention, you are not just gaining time, you are reclaiming authority over your own life. You are saying, today will not happen to me. I will happen to today. Most people never realize how much power is lost in the first hour of the morning. They give it away freely, to noise, to distraction, to delay. But your life begins to shift the moment you stop reacting and start deciding. And I'll tell you this, once you experience that kind of control, you never want to live without it again. Because discipline in the morning doesn't just change your schedule, it changes your identity. It teaches you that you are not a product of circumstances, but a creator of direction. And that realization alone can change everything. So I stopped asking how I felt in the morning. I started asking what needed to be done, and I let action answer before emotion ever spoke. That's where the shift began, and everything after that started to align with purpose. And once I understood the power of how I start my day, I had to confront something even deeper, how easily a day can be wasted without a plan. You don't need chaos to lose your life. You just need lack of direction. I've seen it happen quietly. A person wakes up, checks their phone, responds to messages, reacts to demands, and suddenly the entire day belongs to everyone but them. So I began to do something simple but powerful. Before the world could place its expectations on me, I placed my own. I would sit in silence and decide what actually mattered. Not everything. Not 10 things. Just a few. Because clarity is not about doing more. It is about knowing what not to do. I learned that if you don't design your day, it will be designed for you. And most people are living days designed by distraction. Every notification is a command. Every urgency is obeyed. But urgency is not always importance. And that confusion steals more potential than failure ever could. So I started asking myself one question every night before I closed my eyes. What truly deserves my attention tomorrow? Not what is loud, not what is easy, but what actually moves my life forward. And I would write it down. Not in my head, on paper. Because when something is written, it becomes real. It stops floating in possibility and becomes instruction. That small act changed everything. The next morning, I didn't wake up to confusion. I woke up to direction. And there is a different kind of strength in that. You move differently when you already know where you are going. You speak differently. You choose differently. You waste less of yourself. That is what planning gave me. Not control over time, but control over intention. And once intention is in your hands, distraction loses its power. There was another truth I had to learn the hard way. A tired mind cannot carry a strong life. You can have ambition, vision, desire, but if your mind is not fed, it will eventually start feeding on anything available. And not everything available is good for you. I used to underestimate that. I thought thinking was automatic, but it is not. Thinking is shaped. It is trained. It is influenced by what you allow into your mind when the world is quiet and you are most open. So I made a decision. Before I consumed the world, I would first feed my mind something meaningful, something that challenged me, something that reminded me I was capable of more than my current thinking. Sometimes it was a book, sometimes it was silence with reflection, sometimes it was just sitting with a thought long enough to understand it instead of escaping it. And over time I noticed something shift, not just in knowledge, but in awareness. Because what you feed your mind becomes the lens through which you see everything. If you feed it doubt, everything becomes impossible. If you feed it growth, everything becomes a lesson. If you feed it discipline, everything becomes training. Most people are mentally overloaded but spiritually undernourished. They consume everything but grow nothing, and then they wonder why their decisions feel weak. I learned that wisdom does not come from volume, it comes from consistency. A few pages a day can reshape the direction of a life if absorbed with intention, not rushed, not skipped, but respected. And slowly, I stopped looking for motivation and started building understanding. Because motivation fades, but understanding stays. And what stays will eventually guide you when everything else leaves. There was also a moment where I realized something simple but undeniable. The body you ignore today becomes the burden you carry tomorrow. You cannot build a powerful life inside a neglected vessel. Everything you want to achieve requires energy, presence, strength. So I stopped treating movement like an option. I started treating it like responsibility. Not for appearance, not for comparison, but for alignment. Because when the body is active, the mind becomes sharper. And when the mind is sharper, decisions become cleaner. I didn't always feel like it. Most people don't. But discipline is not built in desire. It is built in repetition. You move, even when it is inconvenient. You stretch, even when it feels unnecessary. You walk even when you think you're too busy. And something begins to happen in that consistency. You stop identifying as someone trying to be disciplined. You become someone who is disciplined. Energy changes everything. The way you speak, the way you think, the way you respond to pressure. A strong body gives you endurance for a strong mind. And life demands endurance more than inspiration. So I stopped waiting for perfect conditions. I used what I had, a few minutes, a small space, a decision, and I honored it daily. Because the truth is simple. You don't rise because you are ready. You rise because you refuse to stay where you are. I also learned that goals without review are just wishes with ink on paper. You can write your future down, but if you don't look at it daily, it slowly fades into noise. So I began something intentional. Every morning, I would remind myself of what I said mattered. Not occasionally, not when I felt lost, but daily. Because repetition creates identity. At first it felt unnecessary, but over time, something changed. My decisions started aligning without force. My attention started filtering distractions automatically. Because what you see repeatedly becomes what you believe naturally. Most people drift not because they lack ambition, but because they forget direction. And forgetting is silent. It doesn't announce itself. It just slowly replaces clarity with confusion. So I made my goals visible. I kept them close. Not hidden in a notebook, I rarely open, but present where I could not ignore them. Because what you respect daily will eventually shape your reality. And I stopped treating goals like distant destinations. I started treating them like daily conversations. Because what you speak too often, you eventually move toward. Gratitude changed something deeper in me. Not my circumstances, but my perception of them. I stopped waking up with what I lacked and started waking up with what I had. And that shift alone changes how a man carries himself. I began small. Simple acknowledgements. a moment of awareness, a recognition that even in struggle, there is still breath, still chance, still time. And that realization humbles you in a powerful way. Because gratitude does not deny difficulty. It just refuses to let difficulty define everything. And I noticed something. When gratitude becomes a habit, pressure feels lighter. Not because life changes, but because you do. You start speaking differently, walking differently, responding differently. And people feel that shift before you even say a word. So I stopped chasing what was missing and started respecting what was present. And in that respect, I found strength I didn't know I had. And I became very aware of my words. Because what you say repeatedly becomes what you believe silently. And what you believe silently becomes how you live publicly. So I stopped speaking defeat over myself. I stopped rehearsing limitation. I stopped agreeing with thoughts that reduced my future. Instead, I spoke with intention, even when I didn't feel it. Because words are not just expression, they are direction. And over time, something changes. You begin to hear yourself differently. And when you hear yourself differently, you begin to live differently. Silence became necessary, not isolation, awareness. Because in silence, you meet yourself without distraction. And most people avoid that meeting. But I learned that clarity is born in stillness, not noise. And finally, I learned this. Every day deserves reflection, not judgment, not regret, just honesty. What worked, what didn't, what must change. Because if you do not learn from your day, you repeat it without realizing it. And I made a decision I would not live the same day twice unconsciously. Because life does not change in moments of inspiration. It changes in moments of reflection, discipline, and decision. And that is where transformation truly begins. I used to believe purpose was something you find, like a destination. Like if you searched hard enough, prayed long enough, thought deeply enough in silence, it would eventually reveal itself, fully formed, waiting for you like a sign on the road. But life has a way of correcting what you think you know. There was a period where I stood still longer than I should have, waiting for certainty, waiting for clarity, waiting for that feeling that says, now is the right time. And I'll tell you what I learned in that waiting. It doesn't produce direction. It produces doubt. Because silence without action doesn't give answers. It amplifies fear. And then something shifted in me. I realized purpose is not something you locate. It is something you uncover through movement, through doing, through showing up when it makes no sense to show up yet. Because clarity is not the starting point, it is the result. Most people are waiting for life to feel right before they act, but life doesn't respond to waiting. It responds to engagement. It responds to discipline. It responds to motion. You don't think your way into purpose. You move your way into it. And I began to understand something deeper. Faith is not passive. Faith is action in uncertainty. It is stepping forward when the ground hasn't confirmed itself yet. It is doing the work before the feeling arrives. Because feelings are followers, not leaders. You see, I've met people who are waiting for the perfect opportunity, the perfect timing, the perfect confirmation from life. But perfection is a delay disguised as wisdom, and it keeps more people stuck than failure ever could. So I started doing something simple. Every morning, I would take one action that aligned with who I wanted to become, not who I felt like being that day. Sometimes it was small. Sometimes it felt insignificant, but it was intentional. And over time, those small actions became direction, and direction became clarity. Because purpose doesn't shout at you in silence, it reveals itself in motion, in repetition, in discipline, when motivation is absent. And I learned something I will never forget. Clarity doesn't come before movement, it follows it. So if you are waiting to feel ready, you may be waiting your entire life. But if you begin now, even uncertain, even imperfect, even quietly, you will eventually arrive at something greater than clarity. You will arrive at purpose that you built with your own hands. There was a time in my life when I had to learn something uncomfortable about faith. It does not show itself when you ask for certainty. It shows itself when everything around you is uncertain. I remember standing in moments where I had no proof that things would work out, no visible confirmation, no guarantee that the effort would pay off. Just a decision in front of me, either stay still until I felt safe or move forward without permission from fear. And I'll be honest with you, that space between not knowing and still acting is where most people retreat, because the mind wants evidence before commitment. The heart wants reassurance before risk. But life rarely gives you both at the same time. So I had to redefine what faith meant to me. It wasn't a feeling. It wasn't emotional confidence. It was action without confirmation. It was movement before validation. It was doing what needed to be done, even when nothing around me suggested it would work. And that's where something powerful begins to form inside a man or woman. Courage. Not the loud kind, not the dramatic kind, but the quiet kind that shows up when no one is watching and nothing is guaranteed. I've seen it in my own life. The times where I had to keep showing up, even when results were invisible. Keep preparing, even when recognition was absent. Keep believing, even when logic said pause. And slowly, something changes. Not outside first, but inside. You stop needing permission from outcomes to continue your effort. Most people wait for reassurance before they move. But reassurance is not the beginning of progress. It is often the reward of persistence. And if you wait for it before you act, you may never begin at all. So I learned to move differently. I stopped asking, "Do I see it yet?" and started asking, "Have I done what I am responsible for today?" Because responsibility does not wait for clarity. Responsibility creates it. And I began to treat every action like it mattered, even before I saw results. Because discipline in the unseen eventually becomes reward in the seen. You don't build a life of meaning by waiting for proof that your life will matter. You build it by acting as if it already does. You wake up, you prepare, you move. Not because everything is confirmed, but because something inside you refuses to sit still. And that is where faith becomes real. Not in words, not in hope, but in motion, when nothing guarantees the outcome. So I stopped waiting for life to reassure me. I started moving as if the outcome had already been decided in my favor, even when I couldn't see it yet. I've been in rooms, and I've been in seasons, where everything around me was trying to tell me who I was supposed to be. Not in a loud way, in a subtle way, in the way people look at you, in the way opportunities don't come, in the way life seems to quietly suggest a limit to your story. And if you are not careful, you start agreeing with it. You start shrinking your expectations to match your environment. You start calling limitation reality. You start adjusting your dreams so they fit inside what you can currently see. But I had to learn something that changed the way I carry myself. You are not your environment. You are not your circumstances. You are not the summary of where you started. I've seen people with very little physically, but something unbreakable internally. And I've also seen people with everything available to them, but nothing stable within them. That's when I understood what's around you is not the deciding factor. What's within you is. Because life will always try to introduce you to labels. It will try to define you by what you lacked, what you lost, what you failed at, or what you never had access to. But those are not identities. Those are experiences. And experiences are not meant to define you, they are meant to refine you. I had to make a decision at some point that I would not let my past speak louder than my future. That I would not let a temporary situation become a permanent identity. Because the moment you accept a limitation as who you are, you stop challenging it. And here's the truth most people miss. Your environment is powerful, yes, but your decision is stronger. Your belief is stronger. Your discipline is stronger. If you let it be. You don't become what surrounds you. You become what you repeatedly choose to believe about yourself when nothing around you confirms it yet. So I started acting differently. Not because my surroundings changed, but because my identity had to lead before my environment followed. I would walk into spaces that did not reflect my vision, but I refused to let those spaces rewrite my standards. I carried myself like I was already becoming what I decided, not what I inherited. And that is a hard thing to do, because everything around you will ask you to adjust, to slow down, to fit in, to accept what is available instead of what is possible. But if you keep adjusting to your environment, you will eventually disappear into it. So I stopped asking, "Where am I?" and started asking, "Who am I becoming?" Because where you are is temporary, but who you are becoming is directional. And I learned something simple but powerful. Your identity must be louder than your surroundings. It must speak before circumstances speak. It must lead before conditions improve. Because if you wait for your environment to change before you change yourself, you will wait longer than life gives you time. But if you change first, internally, your environment eventually has no choice but to respond. So I made a decision. I would not let where I come from define where I am going. I would act from identity, not limitation, from vision, not validation. And that is where everything begins to shift. I want you to understand something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The life you keep dreaming about is not hiding in some distant opportunity, and it is not waiting for the perfect moment to arrive. It is sitting directly behind the very thing you keep postponing every single day. And I know how that sounds, because I've been there. You wake up with intention, you feel the weight of your goals, and then almost immediately there is that one thing you avoid, the task you delay, the conversation you push aside, the discipline you keep rescheduling, and somehow, without noticing it, your entire day begins to orbit around avoiding that one responsibility. But I had to learn something uncomfortable about human nature. We don't usually fail because we don't know what to do. We fail because we refuse to do what we already know must be done. There were moments in my own life where I could feel the resistance inside me. Not confusion, resistance. That invisible pull toward comfort, toward delay, toward later. And I realized something powerful in those moments. Avoidance is not harmless. It is directional. Every time you avoid something important, you are choosing a different future without realizing it. And that future is built quietly. Not in big dramatic failures, but in small, ignored responsibilities. One day at a time, one delay at a time, until potential starts to feel like regret. So I began to confront something directly. I stopped negotiating with discomfort. I stopped allowing my mind to decide which responsibilities were convenient. Because anything worth having will always require discomfort first. And I noticed something interesting. Once you face the thing you avoid, everything else in your day becomes easier. Not because the work got lighter, but because you stopped carrying the weight of avoidance. That is where strength is actually built. Not in inspiration, not in planning, but in execution against resistance. Most people think greatness is about talent or timing, but I've seen something different. Greatness belongs to the person who does the uncomfortable thing first. The person who stops escaping responsibility and starts confronting it. Because when you do that, something shifts inside you. You stop living in reaction to your tasks and start leading your actions. You stop being ruled by avoidance and start being guided by discipline. And I'll tell you this clearly, your future is not waiting for more information. It is waiting for execution. And execution always begins with the thing you least want to do. So when you wake up tomorrow, don't ask what feels good first. Ask what you've been avoiding and do that. Before distraction, before delay, before comfort has a chance to speak. Because that one decision is where your future quietly begins. I've learned something over time that most people resist accepting at first because it removes the comfort of waiting for the right feeling. Growth does not respond to inspiration. It responds to repetition. And repetition does not ask you how you feel. It asks you whether you are willing to show up again. There were days in my life where I felt powerful, focused, and ready. And there were days where I felt nothing at all. No motivation, no spark, no sense of direction. And what I had to understand is that both days required the same action, because life does not pause for your emotional state. It continues moving, whether you are ready or not. And I had to confront a difficult truth. Most people are not stuck because they lack potential. They are stuck because they only act when they feel inspired. But inspiration is not designed to sustain you. It is designed to start you. And if you depend on it to continue you, you will always fall back into inconsistency. I've seen this pattern in many lives. A person gets excited, they change their routine for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, and then slowly they return to what is familiar. Not because they failed in ambition, but because they failed in repetition. And I had to ask myself a serious question. What kind of life is built on emotional permission? If I only show up when I feel like it, then I am not disciplined. I am dependent, and dependency is not strength. So I started focusing less on intensity and more on consistency. Not big moments of effort, but small, repeated actions that did not require emotional approval. Waking up the same way, thinking the same way, training the same way, learning the same way, even on days when nothing felt exciting. And something interesting begins to happen when you commit to repetition. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop asking if today is the right day. You stop waiting for motivation to return. Because your identity is no longer built on emotion. It is built on pattern. I realize that every person you admire is not defined by what they did once, but by what they did repeatedly when no one was cheering. That is where strength is actually formed. In the quiet return to discipline, in the refusal to break what you already promised yourself. And over time, repetition does something powerful. It removes doubt, because when you repeat something long enough, you no longer question whether you can do it. You simply do it. And that shift is where identity begins to solidify. So I stopped chasing inspiration. I started respecting repetition. Because inspiration fades, but repetition builds something far more permanent. It builds character. And I understood something I will never forget. You do not become who you want to be in a single moment of motivation. You become it in the thousands of quiet repetitions that nobody sees, but that shape everything you become. And that is where real growth begins. I want you to understand something that most people give away without realizing it. Energy. Not physical energy alone, but the energy of how you enter your own life. Because every morning, before the world touches you, before anyone speaks to you, before anything happens to you, you are already deciding the tone of your day. And I had to learn this the hard way. There were seasons where I would wake up and immediately feel behind. Before anything even went wrong, I had already stepped into the day with pressure, with doubt, with heaviness. And I didn't realize at the time that nothing outside of me created that feeling. I brought it with me. That's when I understood something powerful. You don't wait for life to give you energy. You decide what energy you bring into life. And that decision quietly shapes everything that follows. Because if you enter your day scattered, your decisions become scattered. If you enter your day irritated, your responses become sharp. If you enter your day doubtful, your actions become hesitant. The world is not just reacting to what happens to you, it is reacting to what you carry into it. And I had to stop and ask myself a difficult question. Why am I allowing circumstances that haven't even happened yet to control how I show up? Why am I letting yesterday enter today without permission? That's when I started taking responsibility for my internal state, not blaming the outside world for what was happening inside of me. Because the truth is, no one can control your energy without your agreement. No situation can define your mindset unless you allow it to settle inside you. So I made a shift. I stopped waking up and reacting. I started waking up and deciding. Before the phone, before the noise, before the world could pull me in different directions, I would set the tone intentionally. Sometimes that meant gratitude, just acknowledging that I have another chance, another breath, another opportunity to move differently than yesterday. Sometimes that meant movement, getting the body active so the mind could follow. And sometimes it was simply clarity, reminding myself what actually matters today and what does not deserve my attention. And something changes when you begin your day this way. You stop entering life like a victim of it. You start entering it like someone who is responsible for their presence inside it. Because energy is not something you wait to receive, it is something you generate. And once you understand that, you stop handing your emotional state to people, to circumstances, to delays, to stress. You become intentional. You become grounded. You become aware that your mindset is not a reaction, it is a choice. And I'll tell you this, when you start your day with that level of responsibility, everything shifts. You don't chase control anymore. You embody it. And that is where real strength begins.